You're running for council. I'm sure you gave it a lot of thought. My first question would be, are you going to be one of the one and dones of the youth that people and entrust to carry, fulfill a really important role in balancing the equation at council? But we've had two that, like Scott Robertson, looked like he was going to be a really good, strong force, but he's one and done. Marcus got in, took a job. So what makes us, as voters, giving me confidence that you're not just going to leapfrog or just waste your time, our time?
I appreciate that question. And for me, getting involved with an organization, whether it's a board or city council, I know the term ahead of time. And so I do plan on, for sure, fulfilling at least my first term. And then I do want to consider continuing on as a city councilor again next term if I was elected. But in all honesty, I think sometimes being the only or very few young people has been challenging for previous councilors because they're more alone. They don't have other people like them around the table to work with and connect with. So I'm really hopeful that this time around, if I get on council, I'm also not the only young person. There's a lot of great options out there, and I think that if we can have a couple of people around the council table, it'll help balance it out, and then also make it easier to want to continue on because you have others to support you.
Well, that's a good way to look at it, and I appreciate the fact it must be hard for a person on the first term with very little civic direct experience at that the strange animal that is municipal politics, which requires people to be able to work with whoever is at the table, right? So it is a matter of a marathon, not a sprint. So I'm glad to hear that you're considering that it's an 8-year commitment to get anything done.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what makes you a good candidate for being in that position?
I've lived in North Bay my entire life, and I've always been involved growing up, from student councils to different event planning groups, and it's always just been within me to want to give back and also be a part of the greater good. And so when I went to university, I ended up staying here and going to Nipissing and studied political science and history, which gave me a great foundation for understanding historical trends and different outlooks and political perspectives from all different angles, but then also to learn about debate and how to have conversations with people even if you don't agree, but finding common ground to move forward. So with all my experience just always being involved, and then what I've learned in university, I've also taken work experience and worked on boards of directors, and I've worked for the Board of Governors at Nipissing for 6 years. So I understand the premise of, meeting decorum and committee structures and operational structures, so I can see how it can translate into municipal politics. But I also want to lend my perspective to being involved in that too.
I think I remember covering Nipissing University Awards at one time, and I think you were there and getting an award of some sort. What was that for? And just to jog my memory.
At Nipissing?
Yeah, I think so. Student awards, or was it an achievement awards or something like that? It might have been the Dave Marshalls.
I've helped a lot with the Dave Marshall events.
Oh, okay, maybe
yes,
that's what it was,
yeah.
right?
No.
Did you have curly hair at one time?
Yes, I did.
That's it. Okay, I remember you. That was a long time ago.
Yeah, no, and I was the Young Professional of the Year in 2020 with the Chamber, so that's...
Might have been it too.
Might have been it too. And with that, it was, it is a great honor to be recognized for contributing and being a part of different organizations. And I do hope that, it inspires other people to want to get involved and put themselves out there too.
What are some of the other organizations you've been involved with?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, the Young Professionals, I was the chair and a member for almost 4 years, and I also served on the Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors while I was chair of the Young Professionals. And then I've been a part of Near North Crime Stoppers for the past 3 to 5 years. COVID years sometimes skew up the length of time. And then I'm currently the chair of the Lindsay Weld Center, which is a childcare center.
Right.
And so they have a board of directors, and I've been chairing that for the past year.
Oh, that's important work. That's cool. what are your interests in when you get to council? Do you have a specific goal?
I really want to connect the community more with City Council and create more of a conversation and open transmission of information from council to the community and the community to council. I've noticed when I've been trying to engage with previous city councilors in the city that sometimes my emails would go unanswered, or you wouldn't really get an answer. And even if it's not the answer I want to hear, I just appreciate a response. And so I want to find more ways to share information with the community, but also hear from them. And so I have some ideas to do neighborhood town halls, to meet people where they're at instead of expecting them to come to City Hall to give feedback, but going to community events or setting up tables, going to high schools, and just being there to listen and to engage. We do see a lot of misinformation because there's a lot of council meetings, there's a lot of committee meetings, and there's a lot of documents. And even for councilors to go through all that information, to expect just the average person who isn't a city councilor but wants to be a part of it to have to go through all of that just to learn. We should have more digestible, easy to read information that we're transmitting to the public, whether it's social media, a newsletter, a magazine, or meeting people for conversations. I think that would help dispel a lot of misinformation when people try and fill in the gaps.
Communication liaison outreach.
Mm-hmm.
I like it. More communication's better, and I think definitely the city and the councillors can learn to fill in those gaps when they have opportunities. I know that they miss out sometimes when the media is actually trying to cover something, and if they don't like the report or they don't like the opinion, they don't always reach out thinking it's something that they can't adjust or improve. And I think that's when I tell elected officials is when you see an issue being covered, that's your opportunity to add to it with letters to the editor, commentary. It doesn't have to be a fight. It just needs to be the start of a conversation.
Exactly.
That's what I try to tell people about my columns, even though once in a while they think I'm trying to end the conversation. I'm actually, my hope is I'm starting the conversation. Sometimes it takes a mature person to understand that, I think, to not take it personal.
Exactly.
Right?
And that's some different ways of doing it too, engaging with the media, opinion pieces or op-eds. But then also Scott Robertson, I really liked when he would go over the agendas before the meeting on Facebook Live, and people had the opportunity to comment and ask questions. So that's something that I can see continuing on and being a part of, because it is a transmission of information so that people are in the loop and have different opportunities to try and engage and be a part of the process too.
And I think, excuse me, I think they should do that through the city website. The councillors should have a way to do that, because not everybody wants to be on Facebook. They're not in every one of the fractured sort of social media outlets. But the website should be the central community hub for communications. And if Scott did that on the website, and each councillor had an opportunity to have a spot where they can do that kind of communication, it would improve a lot, because that would bring people to the website where you don't have to be a Facebooker, and there's a lot of people that aren't, and they don't want to.
No.
Right? That's why I actually created a website. I haven't utilized it as much, but Facebook is limited, and it's also a business platform where you have to pay for your reach, right?
Engagement, yep.
So no, move it, everything. Use the website, and I like the idea of more documented meetings so that you can go back and review. So I hope the city continues that.
Yeah, no, I agree. And yeah, Facebook is a tool just like Twitter and Instagram, and even having it centrally stored on the city website, it can be linked to all those locations.
Sure can.
And so it still can be communicated out there using those tools, but at least someone could just go to the city website and find the information there and find the videos and know that that's where they can go and check.
Oh yeah, for sure. And Scott did a great job with that, and I'm a little peeved that he's a one and doneer, because he had a great potential. I know it's frustrating, and I know why. He wanted big changes right away, And maybe he's not wrong, but that's not practical as far as I'm concerned. It's a long haul to make changes, and then while everybody pushes back and says incremental changes don't do it, well, that's reality.
It is, yeah. And even having, the city strategic plan, I don't know if you've had the chance to look through it, but it's very lofty statements, and it doesn't actually have targeted goals or steps or measurements or, key performance indicators that would help us know if we're actually meeting the targets of the strategic plan. And so that's another thing that I would like to bring forward is just adding goals or adding the steps that it's going to take, because then when we look back, or we know which direction we should be going into, or if we do a step, we can actually check it off and see the progress as it takes place. And change does take a lot of time, and it can be uncomfortable and it can be difficult. But I do think that change will happen if we can keep at it.
So it's quite the eclectic group of council candidates, some with more experience than others, and I know that there's a push for change and progressive people, but I know that there's so much institutional knowledge in some of these old white guys that people seem to think that aren't playing the role that they want. But wow, if you remove all of them at the same time, you're going to be in the deficit of institutional knowledge, which is important. Are you aware of how much change and progress has been made to deal with the issues that are being raised at the debates, that is already in the works, that needs some mitigation for the problem areas, like up at Chippewa for the transitionary housing, other housing things? Like, there's a lot that's going on that hasn't really come to fruition yet.
Yeah.
So what do you think of as far as what needs to be done immediately, but also give it some time to work itself out? It's not a really good question. But
No.
tell me what you think of people that think there's no plan, because there's a couple candidates that are saying there's nothing been done and we have to make a plan, but there's some plans in the works.
There are, and I think that goes back a lot to a strategic communication plan, and just, again, being able to communicate out, yes, there are plans, yes, they exist, but giving regular updates or finding ways to report back so that the general community understands what's taking place. And I do feel that the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan, there is a coordinator at the city who's overseeing that plan being implemented. And things have started and things have been going on. And it's just that I feel that City Council needs to continue, advocating and checking in and making sure that things are progressing. So then that way we can, as the representatives for our community, report back and let people know, yes, we are still experiencing challenges with homelessness, substance use, and mental health, but these are the things that are taking place. And, talking about the time that it will take to do certain steps or figure things out. And again, it's just going back to communication and just how can we take the information that we as city councilors are getting, because we're a part of those conversations and reading all the documents, and sharing it more publicly for our community to hear.
I think a key spot for communication where a lot of stuff is their responsibility is DSAP. So if there's ever a need for an improved communication thing, it might be DSAP's bailiwick right there, because I see that as a place where a lot happens, but it's not covered on a normal regular basis as much, and they control a lot of little pieces, and their responsibilities are there, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And so working together, creating collaboration between DSAB and our city communication, so then that way, if we're responsible for this community well-being plan, but we have major players like DSAB and other service providers and organizations coming up with a strategy with all of them, because they're going to have communications officers that work for their organizations, and instead of each coming up with their own messaging, we can work on a message together and make sure that we're doing it aligned and in communication.
Yeah, definitely. And I do believe a central hub of communication needs to be improved out of the city website, because that's where it should start, I think. Yeah, definitely. What are the other important things on your platform that you want to talk about?
Let's see. So affordability is also a really important piece. We're seeing inflation across Canada, across the world. Costs are going up. And it's really, I'm finding, starting to create an even bigger divide between those who can afford and those who cannot. Mm-hmm. And I want to hear from people who are having challenges or struggling to make ends meet, and making sure that we're advocating to the other levels of government or to our community partners to make sure that they're taken care of. Mm-hmm. Because it's not going to get any better if we're not working together to help those who need help and making sure that they have the basic needs of life, which is housing and food and employment, because it can be a cycle for people, and we have to find ways to break that so that they have opportunity too, and when they need support, we need to be there for them.
Most of the people that I hear complaining about the burden of property taxes have the nicest houses. Most people that are just getting by hand to mouth don't even have time to complain about their property taxes.
No.
A lot of them don't have property taxes. They're paying rent that they can't afford. So they don't understand necessarily, or they don't feel it directly. Are North Bay City taxes higher than they should be?
They are high. I think about, I have family members that live in other cities, and for the price of their home and how much they pay in taxes and their services, I can see how challenging it is to be able to compare ourselves to others and wonder, what are we actually getting for our taxes? And yes, they keep going up every year. Well, what's changing? And so I think a part of the budget process and part of, in tax increases, when and if they need to happen, again, communication and really being clear and going through it to understand why it's happening. But I don't think that should be our main goal or source of revenue that we're continuously focused on because we can increase it. I think that this is an opportunity for the city to be creative and think outside the box and find other ways to generate revenue that could help offset the costs of everything going up. And instead of it focusing on taxpayers and the tax base, how can we look at other opportunities to bring in revenue that can offset the need for more money?
Do you have any ideas for user fees? Because that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, so I think that especially in the off season, when it comes to hockey, making sure that our arenas are being utilized for other activities and that they're really being met with their full potential, and coming up with a plan for how we can generate revenue or events that will attract people. And so even combining, when there is a hockey tournament in town, also maybe having the downtown gallery hop or some other activities outside of sport that could complement things for people to do while they're here for the weekend for a tournament in the community, and having more festivals type activities. The Bay Block Party was a hoot. I have only heard positive things about it, and thinking about how the city could be a part of helping see those types of events take place even more frequently, I think would help with us finding different ways to be creative and generate more revenue.
Well, the real estate board is flush with money, and they benefit from a lot of the activities the city does to encourage development, because new houses, sales, and whatnot. So maybe we can tax the real estate people more.
So yeah, tax the rich. Yeah. Well,
I just might have lost a couple advertisers, but there's areas in the city where there is they are flush with money. They've done very well based on the city's work and policies and whatnot. So if there's a way to more clearly get revenue, that might be one spot.
Yeah. No.
And they can take, they can gain some goodwill and marketing out of it themselves, right? Like the Bay Block Party, that's an excellent way for them to generate something where it brings people together. And so that is a good thing, and they should do more of that.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. And so, one of the festivals that people talk about is the Heritage Festival, and it's been a number of years, but it's stuck with people, how much they felt that brought people together, brought people from out of town, and was just something to look forward to. And I know it's had its challenges and its variations over the years, but maybe we don't need to think about that scale, but maybe we can think about even starting with one weekend a year or a winter carnival to complement it as well, seeing as we are
3 block parties downtown equal the massive Heritage Festival, and it spreads out the risk, weather related.
Yes.
And definitely there's more that can be done to provide venues as well for the groups that want to do that sort of thing. That is, like, for example, the Arts Center is a great asset. It has limited use for some of the smaller groups because of the costs involved in using it. So maybe, eventually, maybe a smaller half venue that is public as well, that suits practicality, right? Do you have any other ideas that you're hoping you can get some support on? What are one of the things you're going to try to do when you get into council?
For me, I think it's breaking down barriers for others.
Okay.
And so even, running for council was, trying to find the paperwork on the website, making sure I had the right documents, getting the signatures, having to talk to other people to figure out if I'm doing the right thing, and just thinking about how that is actually not bringing people together when there's so many barriers. And so removing those barriers, whether it be having those town halls in communities and in neighborhoods so that they don't have to travel to you, and then listening to them where they are and going to events and just being open.
Okay. I like your idea of the practical concept of a ward system without a ward system. Because I don't know necessarily whether the ward system suits North Bay because of the way it's structured, and I know there's some really cons to that, because you're missing out on some potential talent for council if you're basing it on just the ward sort of collective and who lives where, right? And if you function like a ward by outreach like you're talking about, I think that might be a good first step.
Definitely. And I have to say I would support a study on the ward system, because it has been something when I'm talking to people that they go, I wish I knew who I should contact, because sometimes I just feel like I need to send the email to all 11, including the mayor, and hope that someone gets back to me. But if I knew I had this person to contact to bring my idea forward, and then they knew that they were responsible for a certain group or a certain area of town, they could make sure that they're not trying to put themselves too thin by taking care of everyone. We can all kind of take care of the people in our communities, but I do see, and I have been looking at the pros and cons, because there's many studies that have been done in other communities where they have or haven't implemented a ward system, and there's lots of pros, but then there are the cons to it can limit good candidates because of where you have to be living, or some people might take it on and be really focused and hyper-focused on an issue in their neighborhood, and they can't think about the city or other neighborhoods or the bigger picture. So if there was a ward system in North Bay, I think it would also need to come with a lot of training and support for the councillors to make sure that they understand their role as, in governance, that although they might be elected in that ward and they have responsibilities to that ward, they also have responsibilities still to the entire community. So, a hybrid system could work too, where you have 5 wards and 5 at large, or we could try a ward system. But I think, a study would be a good place to start, just to even grasp, how many people in North Bay would want one. Have we ever done a poll on that? Bay Today might have, but
well, there's limits to those polls because it only reaches people that that are within that circle. while you're talking, and I've thought about this quite a bit, I actually suggested once where the councillors should break up into a ward system representatively as committees, right? So like the you pick and choose which committee you want to be on, and then you end up on the ones that you have to be on, do the pecking order and whatnot. But why not function, like I say, like a ward, assign ward areas for the councillors to be the lead person in that area. It functions that way, even if you're not living that way. The thing about the ward system, and you'll find this when you study it, is that it takes a lot of effort and time to do it. And then once you do it, it's almost impossible to get out of it, right? If it doesn't work. So if you just create a system of having designated people for different neighborhoods and areas, it functions just like that.
Yeah, without it having to be the voting section. Yeah, and that's a good way to test it too and see if it's something that would work, or if it's something that people just don't enjoy and they still just reach out to the counselor that they want to deal with things.
I think we just solved the problem here.
Perfect. I'm going to take that. Yeah.
What else would you like to talk about? Because whatever you want to put out there, I'm just going to throw a little something for you to consider and see how you react. Is there another topic that you would like to be challenged here in this interview with?
This morning I actually met with a class from Algonquin High School.
Okay.
And they had some really great questions. And they did their research. They related on finding it difficult to find information on the city website. And I said, that's something that we can always work on improving. And the city website has come a long way, and I think it still has ways to go. But just like everything, it can always be better. But they asked me about, on my website, I talk about the status quo. And they wanted me to, expand on what I meant by, the status quo is doing things the same way and expecting different results, or expecting it to just be stagnant. And I shared with them how, as much as change is incremental and can be challenging and uncomfortable and there's pushback, why not try new things? And whenever in the workplace or in life I'm faced with the situation or the statement, well, this is the way things have always been done, I ask why. And if it's kind of like, well, just because, that's not a good answer to me. Just because that's the way we've done it, let's try something different. Let's think differently. Let's ask different questions. Let's try something. And it's okay to fail. Don't repeat mistakes. Once you learn, move forward. But I do think that, we need more people who can represent different perspectives around the table. And so having some of the counselors that have been on council before and having that institutional knowledge is definitely an asset, and is something that would be missed if none of them were to be reelected. But then also having perspectives from people from different walks of life, different genders, different ages. I definitely think that would help change the status quo and just the way that some mentality and some thoughts are trained. We can, break that down and really challenge ourselves to just be different and be better.
Okay, well, totally understand that. My response, maybe just to be devil's advocate, and seeing that you're a political history major, where we're at isn't always the way it had been. Where we're at is an evolution of a lot of different new things tried and failed and succeeded. So change is not necessarily an improvement if it don't understand why we're, like you say, do things this way. There's definitely ways to improve without changing what we've already engineered over many years. For example, and I like how a lot of the First Nations are dealing with this, is that they have elder councils, they have youth councils, they don't just have elected councils. And I think North Bay can adopt some of those more inclusive bodies that can have input and responsibilities. So maybe that's an idea.
I like that idea. You know, I've looked at getting involved on city committees where they do have the public who can step forward. And I'm not sure if I just wasn't maybe looking in the right place, but it wasn't too clear for me how to get involved. And I think that we need to open it up more to different people, and maybe not just the same people or people that have done it because they've always done it too. And yes, they might have great experience and perspective, but how are they sharing that with others? And how are they helping bring other people along too? And I often hear people talk about, keeping our youth and keeping our young people here. But then when I'm even a part of conversations, I'm not treated as a peer. I'm treated as someone who's young, who's maybe naive or inexperienced. And, that's not conducive to creating a positive relationship to work with. And so where I've seen the most growth in myself is when I've had, bosses and supervisors and coworkers and friends that are mentors, and that we have a relationship that's peer-to-peer and not so much, a patriarchal kind of, oh, well, let me tell you, I've been around, I have this experience, this is why you're, wrong, or this is why you don't get it. And instead, being respectful of the different opinions. And I actually, when I spoke to the class this morning at Algonquin, at the end I said to them, I'm like, it's my chance to ask you folks a question now. And I asked them what they liked about North Bay, what they didn't like about North Bay. And they really hesitated. And I'm going, no, just throw it out there. And they said, oh, we like the things to do here. I'm like, well, be specific, tell me more. And once they started kind of bouncing each other's ideas and being like, oh, I like this. Oh, no, we need a cat cafe downtown kind of thing. Like, I would go downtown if there was this or that. And I'm going, how many times have they just even had this opportunity to spitball and throw ideas out there with elected officials or people seeking to be a part of council, and hearing their ideas and getting them excited? I'm going, okay, like if we can capitalize on continuing these dialogues with the youth and with our seniors and with our different groups, we're going to be better representative of the people that live in North Bay.
Excellent point. Totally agree. Every segment of society should be involved, and the door should be open and inclusive like that. One point though, patriarchal, even matriarchal systems are founded on the elders. Mm-hmm. So it's not necessarily a wrong thing to lean on your experienced people, but they need to be experienced people that are open to the input from each of the segments of their community. So I think a lot more of that can be done.
Yeah.
And if somebody's on council like yourself that focuses in on making sure it gets done, and it's not just performative, mm-hmm. and that there's some real connection, I think you'd have an improved municipal council for sure.
Yeah, and I do agree, I do respect the opinion of elders and people that have also been around the block a number of times. It's just when their approach isn't to be a partnership or a friendship, but it's more of a, let me tell you because I know, mm-hmm. and you don't kind of attitude that goes like, oh, well, this is what turns young people off, is that it feels like we're trying to penetrate this, clique almost of people who have already been here, who already are established, who already are whatever. Mm-hmm. And it's really hard sometimes to just get in and be a part of it too, and not feel like you're on the outside.
Yeah, no, and again, I totally understand. I got a 24-year-old boy that I was an inexperienced parent, and I didn't necessarily have the right approach to help him benefit from my experience. And it was my inability to actually communicate properly so that he felt necessarily every time that I was worthwhile listening to.
A lesson from Dad again.
Yeah. But he often now when we talk about things, he shares with me that even though he didn't like the delivery and it was ineffective at the time, he uses that now, right? So sometimes, definitely, the responsibility is on the wiser person through experience to be able to, be inclusive, definitely. I also want youth and others, parts of segments, to know that sometimes it does take you to break down the door, and you need to be resilient in your effort. And if just because it's not easy,
Yep.
that's part of the test and challenge of life, right? Failure should make you harder and more determined, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not necessarily, it shouldn't be easy,
No.
because that tests you, and it can't be for everybody and make it easy to be part of something. It has to be the people that have determination and resilience to do it, because that's needed, and it never goes away.
Yeah.
I like the conversation we're having.
I do too. Yeah, no, it's been
Appreciate
great.
that. It's not just the pamphlet stuff, and it's the reality that we have. We need everybody on board.
Yeah.
And it's finding a way to do that.
Yeah, and as you said earlier, there's a lot of things that are already happening, and there's a lot of, things that happen with city council that they approve that, even if we come in there, we can't stop it from happening. These things need to take place. But for me, it's about the perspective and how I plan to approach these decisions.
The approach.
And approach the conversations. And instead of having really a kind of plan of, or platform, I have more of an approach is how I
like it.
Kind of put myself on there. Because when I was creating my website, I was like, do I have priorities? Do I have a platform? And I'm like, well, I want people to know how I make decisions, how I engage with people, and what I'm like. And so my pillars were connection, empathy, and collaboration, which are buzzy words, right? They're kind of a bigger umbrella word, but I found that they really captured how I would plan to lead. And every day when I would wake up, those are the types of things I think about when I'm going to work or when I'm a part of a group. It's, okay, how am I connecting with people? How are we making sure we're bringing people in so that we're hearing information? How am I, putting myself in someone's shoes to truly understand their journey and their experience and understand their why? And then focusing on collaborating, because we have a lot of very talented, engaging community members in North Bay. A lot of passion, 29 people running for council. I hope that the 19 who are not elected, I joke, create a shadow cabinet. And maybe it's not a joke, that just to stay a part of it, to keep us accountable, to be a part of the conversations and find ways that we continue to give back to our community.
I think every candidate that runs should actually be committed to being on a shadow cabinet of some sort, that they can't just lose and go home. That you've participated, you've taken part in it, now you have to take part in it even though you didn't win a spot, right? And so that would be your proving ground, for sure. When I was considering running for council over the course of the year, I wanted to play that type of role that you're thinking about, and I really appreciate that that's where you're into the outreach and to be playing a role of bringing people together and being inclusive. I thought I had skills in mediation, even though a lot of times people think I'm just divisive, but I actually have, from my life experience, is that the battles and being divisive don't really get you very far. You need somebody with that role to bring people together, right? And even though I have very strong opinions about things, I actually form those opinions by talking to all the different areas. And I've managed to be able to keep talking to most people, even though I don't agree with them or they don't agree with me. And that I'm glad that at least some of the councillors that are running for the first time have that same idea.
And I think that's the thing, is there's going to be 10 of us around the table and 6 to pass a motion, and we might not always agree on things, and I think it's healthy to be able to have those conversations and have those debates, and sometimes have to remove a motion or whatnot, just to actually, because sometimes people will get their backs up. But let's talk about it. Let's talk it through, and it's okay at the end of the day if we don't agree. But we do have to find ways to work together.
Right on. Well, I know that you have a busy evening ahead of you.
Yes, I do. Yes.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Dave. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Good luck.
Thank you. Yeah.
Right on.
Let's do it.